Hi everybody, it's September the 11th 2023. I'm currently driving down to Middlezoy Aerodrome from my home in Weston-super-Mare. Today it's to catch up with Chris Collins for volume 2 of Tales from the Hut and Hangar. Chris is an aviation archaeologist and historian. I've known Chris for must be 5 years with our connections with Middlezoy Aerodrome. So today should be really interesting because Chris has got a lot of artefacts and stories to tell about his digs and his interest in aviation. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello, welcome, and we're here with Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Keith.
Thanks for making the time for doing this.
No problem.
I've got some generic questions that I ask everybody, but they do help, and then we just go with the flow. But my first question will be your date and place of birth. Very formal.
Very formal.
To start with.
My date of birth is 4/2/1972, and place of birth was Taunton, Musgrove.
Oh, right, okay. So what was your first childhood memory of aviation, and what do you think got you hooked? What did you see, or did you watch it on the telly? Did you read any books or anything like that?
Just little things, really. My father bought me a cardboard model of a Fokker D7 from the First World War. We built that. I remember a Tiger Moth as well. And my grandfather was ex-RAF and absolutely loved the RAF.
Right.
He was a groundsman. And he and a lot of my family in Portishead saw a Heinkel come down. So I was always wanting to visit this Heinkel. But
Curious, basically.
Curious, but you couldn't because it was out in the mud and it was dangerous. So that was one that did it. And we used to pass a grave in the graveyard with an aeroplane on it, and I always wondered who this chap was, which I found out in later years. So that sort of started off the curiosity, if you like.
Right, so moving on from that, do you remember seeing your first aircraft flying over? Do you remember, were you on any flight paths, or did you see it from the garden or school? You can think of?
We were right on the flight path in Portishead, often coming into Bristol, I guess,
Oh,
and
right.
also Filton. I suppose the earliest memories are of the old grey matter, but chipmunks were always about, coming
right.
from Filton, the training school up there, and often see the 737s and things coming in. But my main memory is chipmunks as a kid. I used to love looking at them. Oh, and a whirlwind. Sometimes you'd see a Wessex or a whirlwind go over.
What, test flights from
Air-sea.
Filton and stuff?
No, well, the Wessex was the Air-sea Rescue, so you'd see them,
right.
the helicopters coming in, but of course I didn't see them no more either. So,
So obviously you got the bug by then. So how did you get into like the digs and that side of aviation interest then?
well, this harks back to my grandmother, grandfather, who saw the Heinkel come down. In fact, my grandfather was so nosy when it happened. He ran out the shelter to look at it just prior to going to the RAF, and a big burly Bristol copper with a gun on his side grabbed him and said, "Get in here!" Back into the shelter. But
What was the location of this then?
Portishead. It was en route to Parnell's aircraft factory in Yates. And it was a real wet and rainy day in February 1941, and the ACAC got it, and it come down on the mud flats at Portbury. And I'd heard stories about this constantly, and I was desperate to go out and try and find a piece of it. But because they'd built Portbury Dock since the war, it had changed the tidal, the mud and the sludge, if you like. And not unbeknown to me, it was covered in 6 foot of sludge, but so we had no chance of finding it. But I have seen photos of it in the 70s, the early 70s, with the bits of the engine still there and bits and pieces, but I just couldn't get to it.
Oh, right, that's a shame, isn't it? So you're obviously inquisitive about doing this sort of stuff. What was your first record of actually helping out doing a...
Well, down to this Heinkel again, me and my friend at school, we were in our early teens, mid-teens, and he's an airline pilot now, but we went to Bristol Library, tried to find out more information, and we found a group of, years ago, if you want a kind of club or an organisation, you'd look for a book in the library. And we found one for the old chap called Mr. George Morley, who ran the South West Aircraft Recovery Group in Bristol. And we rang him and said, "Oh, about this, do you know about it?" And he loved our passion as kids, and he was an ex-war veteran, ex-paratrooper. And he took us in, and he actually did say that was one of the first digs we ever went to, sites, in 1973. And he took us under his wing, and he took us off to meet the guys in Harcombe Farm it was in Gloucestershire, Marshfields, where a P-38 Lightning come down.
All right.
And that's we went there to do a bit of a clean-up after the main dig, and it was all just fields. It was a really foggy, eerie day, and I remember feeling humbled being there. First time, because a chap had died, December 43.
It's a bit spooky then as well.
Yeah, it felt a real... But there was bits and pieces of this lightning lying about, and we collected them up to clear up, because the farmer wanted it cleared. And it wasn't, a lot, but I was just so amazed. And on the same farm was also a Halifax bomber, EB-146, which...
So you've been reading up on all this stuff as well at the same time, have you?
Yeah.
Got loads of books and
of course,
things?
George
Give you the knowledge.
suggested different things, different books to get. A lot of the books were coming out at the time. We helped with the book Somerset at War, Mac Hawkins, all sorts of things like that. So the interest grew. But back then it was purely going through records and or newspapers, and to find, and knocking on doors and rumours and
Chatting to people, I suppose.
Yeah, chatting to people, which of course now there's no one left, but really.
Did you have a small collection of stuff at that point? Shells and things, or?
I think I come back from that meeting with George, both of us absolutely so excited I can't. It was just bits of rubbish, if you like, but it was just this.
The curiosity's come off a plane, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember laying it on a table at my grand's house, about 5 pieces.
Where did your gran live? Portishead, was it?
Yeah. All my family, mum's side of the family, all lived in Portishead. But yeah, just bits of twisted metal, but such a story, in each one. And then me and Kevin started to look at our local area, see what we could find as kids, and then reported into the group. We had a group magazine that George would type up with all different stories from people, and we'd send things in, and if we found nothing...
But that's part of the enjoyment, is it? The research and going to libraries and trying to find out this stuff. Obviously you've got the internet now, which is brilliant, because you've got more documented stuff and you can put stuff up there yourself.
It is very much like a detective work. You'll hear a rumour, but just back then, there's a rumour of a plane in such and such an area, and then you look into it and what it was, and you might find a photograph of someone, and it just grows and grows until you get a full story. Right.
So I will say, if there's any dates or any errors we make in our conversation, we'll put on the actual post of the podcast, because there's so many times and dates and stuff to talk about in there, really. Did you then have like an ambition to be a full-time archaeologist doing that sort of thing, or were you just, it was like a good hobby but you hoped to like go further? And what was it like getting permission off of people to do stuff and things?
I left a lot of that, to be honest, up to George and the group, being I was so young, and I couldn't drive. They'd take us, and we'd just pop along to... George would come down to Portishead and pick us up, or Kevin's father would drive us up to meet them, some field somewhere, that sort of thing. But back then, it was literally the farmer's permission. Since 86, though, the law changed. Wasn't too bad to get a licence once you'd given all the relevant information, but for us, it was just, as kids, it was just trying to find the site and the stories. We just asked the landowner and see what little bits we could find. It was never a big digs, not till later on.
Yeah, so What was your interest in aviation? Was it across the board, anything that flew you're interested in, or just interested in the war stuff that crashed, or did you just love it all?
Initially, Battle of Britain, World War Two. That's what got me interested. All the films as a kid. I mean, say Battle of Britain again.
What's your favourite film then? What's your favourite war film then?
Oh, that's tricky. You've got me on the spot
I think mine's The Great Escape. It's not aviation related, it's partly, but that's my favourite. But every time I watch Battle of Britain or The Dam Busters, I don't think they need to remake them, because I just think they're perfect as they are.
I never tire of them. No.
No.
I mean, they're watchable, whatever. But
Well, a lot of it's not CGI as well, is it?
Yeah,
It's actual
I
life.
do like The Red Baron. That's
Yeah.
that's a very good film.
Where did it go from there then? Did you just get more and more involved with it all, or?
Yeah, I guess we did a hell of a lot as kids, and then I come of the age. Girls are more interesting.
Yeah,
So that happened.
music and going out and drinking.
Going out and drinking and
takes
things.
a back seat, doesn't it?
Yeah, it took a back seat.
But do you find as you get older with this sort of stuff, I found it, especially with myself, is that you get more interested as you get older, because probably you appreciate time, and then you grow up and understand what sacrifices these people did and how clever they were developing aviation and machinery and all the rest of it. And also, I think you mentioned the RF. I mean, I got connections to the RF with my dad, and most of the people I find that I talk to or are involved in aviation have always had like an uncle or dad, or there's something that really sparked their avenue, really, which way to go.
I mean, for my granddad, the stories he told me, he took the air gunnery course but failed it, which I'm glad of in a way.
Bad shot.
Yeah, basically his eyesight
It
wasn't
saved
great.
his life, probably.
It saved his life more likely, but he did go around. He went to Bewley. He was in Iceland with Coastal Command
Yeah.
quite a while.
Wow.
So initially, he was a fire watcher with Army Air Training Corps,
All right.
and his father was one of the officers for the Air Training Corps in 1941. So, of course, he wants to join it. And yeah, he told me stories of a Thunderbolt landing and the bomb skidding off and them all diving into the dirt, and Americans burning all their, as they pulled out of a base, all their silk shirts, and because they did just buried or burnt it back then, and he was devastated that silk shirts could be burnt.
All right. So we'll say at this point that with Chris, we're going to do the 6 aviation images bit, where Chris is going to post, and we'll talk about 6 of his favourite pictures, which no doubt will include some of the stuff we talk about here now. But did you find that as time went on, you got into bigger projects? Did you get in with like bigger groups of people to do bigger projects?
Yeah, I guess when I had kids, and the kids are sort of a lot older, it never went away. It was always nagging. So I started looking. The internet was around then. Made contact with old friends that used to do it, and these programs, Dig 1940 and all that, the Welsh group, North Gwent Aviation Society, I used to go along with them to some of their digs or investigate with them to try and find.
So you're obviously making lots of contacts as time went on.
And done a few big digs with them, Stirling, Lancaster, Hurricane.
So what's your favourite dig you've been involved with? What's your one that really remembers? Tell us about that.
I think because of my age, one that got me more was it was local. It was down in Ilminster way. Was a Vampire VF 300, flown by Sergeant Richard Butler Lines. I mean, as a kid, it didn't really. Was a young teen. It didn't really hit how sad the story was, or it was just a plane, but this poor devil just blew up.
Right.
And Brian Pittard, who sadly just passed away, he was a member of the South West Aircraft Recovery Group, had witnessed this crash in the early 50s, and we went to the site and with George, and the stuff that was coming out, because what they'd done basically is they gathered it all up, they dug a pit and they threw it all in the pit.
Oh, right.
And There was what was left of the seat, which was lacerated from the turbine blades blowing up. Pieces of cannon, ammo chute, even the straps from the seat, various dials, lots of wood, just all sorts of bit of taffeta tire. And
so was that the most successful or the biggest thing you come across at that point? You remember it so well?
No, I mean, that
the personal story as well.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the most touching ones. And for me as a kid, enthralled me the most because it was the biggest I'd done to date. But years later, with the North Gwent group, we did a Stirling, and they pulled an engine and a propeller blade out of that.
What was the location of that?
That was it got me there. It was just outside Gloucester's, Warwickshire way, Shipston on Stour.
Oh, Shipston on Stour, right. That's
and this thing, there's photographs of it on the web, BF333, and when I actually see a real prop blade, we remember digging down, and all of a sudden this yellow come out of the tip of the prop, and it's a great big paddle prop, and of course connected to that was a great big hub.
Right,
you know, and the engine.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, it was exciting.
A few feet down.
The smell of fuel as well.
Even then.
Yeah, fuel and.
What's the most preserved thing that's always shocked you found then? Is it items of clothing, or is it some stuff survives really well, doesn't it? And some
you worry about finding clothing. I've never really found any clothing as such, but we found. Sometimes we found paperwork where it's got jammed in the clay. You know.
Yeah.
The problem with this stuff is, and the reason why I've located quite a few sites, but I've not dug them, is the minute you take them out of the ground, and the air gets to it, they can rot. So it needs a museum for the
bit like sea things, isn't it? Things you find at sea,
so I used to enjoy finding where they were, but leaving them. You know, could be a couple of surface bits, but I mean, it was crosses on maps for future. If we get a museum here in Somerset, then it'd be worth going to do something about it.
So that was the biggest one you've been involved with, is it?
Yeah, I'd say so. Although the biggest hole would be a Lancaster bomber that dived in. There was two crew. I can't remember the crew, but they were a test pilot and a civilian engineer, and it was brand new. And it dived into the ground from a great height. That hole must have been 30-something feet deep.
Where did that go in then?
That was up near. It was a racetrack. Old airfield, forget it now. That was up that way as well.
What, the same sort of area, basically?
Yeah, NG435. But not a lot for the size of a Lancaster. Not a lot at all came out. I think a crushed crank, bits and pieces, and the fuel on that, because it was such a lot of clay pouring out. You could see it was, you know.
So what's the technique for you guys digging this stuff? Is it like a bit more cruder than what normal archaeologists would do, with brushes and trowels, a bit of a digger work, a bit of shovel, and
it always worked? I mean, it's got better over the years. But you read about them in the 70s, they missed so much stuff because all these groups were leapfrogging over one another, especially in Battle of Britain area, to get all the big bits out.
Oh, I see.
And they'd be straight in there to get the engines and whatnot else, and missing really important pieces, and that's why these digs you see on telly, dig 1940, and a lot of that is going back to the old sites.
So did you become a bit of a crash investigator? You could sort of tell by the way the plane went in and where the bits were, you get a rough idea, then you sort of think, I think it went in that way, or did you know when you went to the site to have a look, you could sort of
you'd have an various things would come together. So, if you had a small circle, perfectly circular, then you would know it had gone straight in vertically. Some of them it could be 300-400 yards, where it's
I suppose it went in shallow. You'd get stuff scattered ahead.
And I mean, people think, how can there be anything left? I mean, but there's always something small left because it obliterates over a wide area, and it'll throw it. I mean, my biggest personal I-organised dig would be on at Charterhouse in Cheddar, and we found the oldest remains of a de Havilland Hornet,
which is close to me, my dad's connection.
Yeah, PX229. Wasn't a lot there. Charterhouse is very rocky, so you only got about a foot of earth.
Yeah, I was reading about it the other day, actually. Was there much left of it then?
No.
Being wooded, wasn't it?
I got the licence and everything, and it hit. It was going from Farnborough to Weston, which had the
low visibility, wasn't it?
Yeah, extreme.
Yeah.
It was low cloud, but he was
would up there.
Yeah, I mean, he was on the way to the torpedo development unit at Weston, which they hadn't had the Sea Hornet yet. They were doing trials, and it come down through the cloud, clipped a tree on one side of the valley, and then went into the other side of the valley, the top of the valley, and it just blew up the valley. Up the 2 or 3 fields, but of course not a lot went in. But we found detritus. I think found a petrol cap, lots of airframe debris, unrecognisable piping, things like that.
So, with my limited interest, knowledge of it all, I mean, the wrecks and relics. When you see what crashed, and here we are at Middlezoy Aerodrome on Western Soyland. When you read back and see all the crashes locally, it's amazing the amount of things that went in. The one that really did intrigue me, I can't remember what the aircraft type was now. Was it a Bolton Pool Defiant or whatever? It crashed into the quarry at
Ferry Battle, Western.
Ferry Battle. That's it. Crashed in that quarry, which is unbelievable. If you've ever been that way, there's just this small quarry on the hill above Welbury Hill, and the misfortune just to fly into those rocks.
Probably again coming down through cloud.
Yeah, no weather.
Of course, they had no GPS, no nothing, and it was, his setting was wrong maybe. But I know that plane, he come down and there's been nothing left of that because he pretty much went into the side of the quarry, and it all landed in the tar pit that they had there.
Not the way to go.
No, not a way to go.
But so yeah, on a local level, really, I suppose, because you've obviously you've done stuff around the area, but the other ones I know about is obviously the Heinkel up on the Mendips and all the stuff around here, really.
That actually is the same farm as the Hornet.
Is it?
Charterhouse. When it belly landed on top of the wall, dry stone wall.
Yeah, that's right. There's a picture, isn't there?
But there was 3 of them. And Stanford Tuck, the ace, was at Pembrey 92 Squadron, and they intercepted them, and I can't remember which way round it went, but I think the first one they intercepted was at... No, got it wrong. The first one they intercepted was at come down at Charterhouse. I have found a bullet off that, fired in the dry stone wall, where they dragged it away.
Oh, right.
The other one come down minutes later at Puritan, and we were in the paper with that. It was a big dig, got some bits of that in someone's garden.
Right.
And then the other one come down in Bridgewater Bay, which of course there's nothing, we wouldn't find that. But yeah, it's interesting. That's the only real Battle of Britain, Somerset, in this area anyway.
What was it? Was it the Beaufighter on the 370? What was that one? By Wick St Lawrence. Did one go in there?
Heinkel. Yeah, it was
Heinkel.
It was Herbert Rose's Heinkel come down.
Were you involved with that at all?
I went there initially.
Because in the press and stuff, and I've read about it years ago.
Yeah, that was on the programme Dig 1940.
That's it, yeah.
Mr. Reddin, the farmer. Now, my wife her father grew up with Mr. Reddin. He's a farmer as well, Mr. Hewlett. And he owned a farm. Not anymore, but they're all good friends. But Mr. Reddin's farm, I took the Welsh lot, North Gwent Aviation, Gareth Jones is always in these programmes, to try and locate the site. He had information, we went in and found a couple of bits and pieces just to log it, got the licence, and but the actual dig, I was working, and I couldn't attend the big dig, but it was a big dig. I mean, they got the 2 engines out and all sorts of stuff at a very deep depth.
And the other one I remember is obviously in the Milton Cemetery, there's the Luftwaffe pilots air crew buried there. I can't remember their story now.
That's not Hans de Later, I wonder.
Yeah, there's 3 graves at Milton Cemetery. I often go past it when I got there.
Check on it. I know there were bodies. I mean, one of them we found 6 months after it come down, the Dornier 217 that come down in Woodspring Bay. Obviously it broke up, and bodies have been
So going back to this area then, all the meteors and stuff. Have you found anything around here from Western Zoyland?
Yeah, I have. We did. Yeah, again, we didn't end up digging it. Got a license, but it was a Meteor from here, T7, like the one we got sat outside here, and an Iraqi trainee pilot, and they're coming to difficulties over Limpsham, near Weston.
Yeah.
And crashed on the Limpsham Holts near there. It also took out a power cable, and they both got out. They both bailed out, or rejected as they were bailed out, I guess, with a T7. I'm not sure, but that went in, and then the farm made a big hole. The farmer said that they didn't clear up very well, so all the farm rubbish went in there as well.
Oh, right.
And they covered it.
Just full of crap.
We were going to dig it, but my worry was the crash site was right underneath some very low power lines.
Right.
And to get a digger in, my worry was, in the end, I just went, even though I had a license and I spoke to the electricity board and everything else, I just thought, if something goes wrong, I'm not risking it.
So, explain to people, and again, we touched on this before our conversation about the legalities and what restrictions you've got now digging a site, and obviously it goes without saying that stuff wasn't so procedural back in the days. But for example, if I went on the internet and found there's another Hornet gone in a field somewhere, what would you have to do today? What sort of things do you have to do and make sure you follow? And
there's two things you need to do. First of all, visit the landowner. You need all your research.
Yeah.
Which is a lot easier now with the internet. People can talk. There's people with books. They can liaise, and much easier in that sense. It is harder though, because the witnesses, whereas in the 80s when I used to turn up, you'd knock on a farmer's door and he'd say, it's in that field over there. Now, often all the farms have changed hands, land's been sold, and no one has a clue.
What I'm saying is, you found the site,
yeah,
and you said you have to get permission or a licence.
Yes, from the... it's under the Protection of Military Remains Act, 1986.
Okay, yeah.
This was brought about predominantly for shipwrecks, because people were robbing shipwrecks.
I can imagine, yeah.
But they posted it on anything military remains.
And obviously there's a lot of money to be made in it now, even if
back then it was just seen as junk, but on the whole. But nowadays, yes, it's got some sort of value, especially if it's got a special meaning to it, a Battle of Britain, or but. So you would do that with the landowner. You need his permission, written permission. You apply for a license from the PMA, past the RAF, or the MOD, I should say, I believe in Innsworth. It was Mrs. D. Sheldon when I was dealing with it years ago, and they would send you a pack. The problem is you need to fill in all the information and an exact grid reference,
right,
down to yards, really.
So there's a lot of that.
Thing is, you need to find it without digging
it's a bit of a catch-22.
Yeah, you need to find it and everything else, but they need all that information before they can even issue a license. They will check it, make sure there's no bodies on board, there's not a war grave, and there's no heavy ordnance, because of course, and if everyone's happy, they will grant you a license for 1 year only.
So you've got a lot of things to consider then, if you even want to do it. Hence why I suppose you're not really in that field like you used to be, because...
No, I don't. Now, I mean, it's hard. You can't just go knocking on doors now. It's very difficult. So a lot of my stuff now, I buy it from sources, or from, like Brian Pittard passed away, and nicely his wife and let me have the bits that he had, with the hope that, because my worry is if I don't collect it in Somerset, and say Tim Hake, another guy. What's going to happen to it if we go?
So the question is then, what would you like? I'll get my blank checkbook out again, or my transfer the funds over to your phone of millions of pounds. What ideally would you like to do all the stuff you? Because now you are, as we said earlier before we started, you're more of a historian now with a collection of containers full of scrap metal that don't mean a lot to the public, but they do to certain people. What would you like to do with it? Put it in a museum, or catalogue it, or everything like that, really?
I have started cataloguing the bits and pieces I've got. I've got a passion, of course. I've got a couple of pieces I want to keep for myself, but I like the small pieces. But
Yeah.
I would like, not a massive museum, a Nissen hut.
Which goes down to where we are now, because people are not aware, we've got quite a collection of stuff in the hut we're actually sat in now. And lots of people have got stuff. And eventually we'd like to have a building here where we could put our stuff and Chris's stuff on show. There's somebody else who does that sort of thing in this area as well. I'm not sure if they've got much physical stuff, but they've got stories and things. But there is room here, I think, or maybe in the future.
I know some of the guys that have done the North Gwent group have done a lot. They went like a dose of salts through this area and any area. They mainly predominantly World War II, Battle of Britain. They didn't really touch anything else. Which is why at the time I got interested in early post-war, because I knew they wouldn't have gone near it. But they have pieces that I'm sure that they've said that they would, if a museum was there, they'd put on loan. You know.
So I think there's a curiosity, because whenever I find anything old and stuff, I'm always curious, like, oh, that come off of that, and it's good to spark the imagination of the younger generation.
Oh,
I think, really.
I mean, I the last dig I went on was with Ian Hotchkiss, who's a relation of Philippa Hotchkiss, who's well known in aviation archaeology, who used to, from Wales, who used to go all over the country looking for Battle of Britain, German stuff, and really knew a business. And but near him in St Athan, Landau, RAF Landau, there is a scrapyard from the war, and whenever they turn it over, he invited me over, and I found bits of, but just from one piece with a part number on it. I put it online, certain groups, and someone will have a drawing and go, that bit fits on the airplane there, and you go, wow, from that bit of crusty relic.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your prized possession then, out of all the stuff you've got? What do you think, the house is on fire, it's going to burn down, what are the things you're going to grab that you really think, I really want to keep that out of all of it?
Well, most of my stuff, because of my humble abode, is small. You know, I love data plates. I love something with writing on it that I can link to.
So what's the most interesting data plate you've got then? Wow me, Chris, with what you've got.
I got a lovely, I'd say it's about 4 inch data plate from the Andersey Heinkel, Lachinsky's Heinkel, which come down just down the road from Weston's Island and shot down by Cat's-Eyes Cunningham, and it's known as the King's Heinkel because it was shot down when the King had visited Middle Wallop and said, how many have you shot down to date? And it said something like 9, sir, and well, can you make the next one for me? You know, and as that night he did, he shot one down.
Well, I've got a plate off a Cessna 150 that scrapped at Luton Airport.
Oh, yeah, but it's
I can't remember the registration.
Yeah.
It was just dumped there, and I thought, I'm having that.
Yeah, I love it.
But it's quite funny what you.
And you can frame them. If there's a plate, I got a lovely our artist Steve Winter. I've done a recent painting of the Heinkel being shot down, and I've got that plate with it, and you can look at a picture and touch an object, and that is part of it.
But it seems a bit trivial, maybe to people who could be cynical of what we're talking about. But once this stuff's gone, it's gone. For God's sake,
that's my worry.
And again, it goes back to what we're doing at the airfield here with all this old stuff we got on the walls here and stuff. It's just that when it's all gone, people say, "Oh, I wish we saved that." I mean, there's horrible stories. There's someone I'm friendly with on the internet who was a British aerospace archivist, and she basically got all the photographs that they put online out of a skip, because they just emptied offices and chucked all these lovely, wonderful original prints into a thing. There's no doubt you found some stuff in skips.
No, I haven't. As I've never worked on. I think I got one small piece of Airbus scrap.
Oh right,
yeah, but I've never worked. But George Morley, the ex-para, he then went on to be a welder with Rolls-Royce, and when he was collecting, and I remember the anger in his face when they got a takeover, probably with Airbus or something.
It's all right, it's the door shutting. There's a ghost walking through. Ghost to Western's Order just come through.
Just see how criminal this is. They emptied the old stuff out of Filton, and one of the things he noticed in the skip was a suit, like an all-in-one suit and a very funny-looking diver's type helmet.
All right.
It was only the first ever air pressurised suit used on the Bristol 138 that won records.
Really?
For the highest flying monoplane.
And they were chucking it out.
And they would not let him have it. It had to go in the skip. And I've heard stories with recently when they emptied out the offices there was photos of Concorde and things from the wall. And if anyone was caught taking anything out of the skip, they were sacked. They'd be sacked immediately. Because now, once it's, and you just think, Jesus has got. Once it's gone for good. I've been looking for Western Wizard drawings. I've just found out that Westerns, when they went to Rotorcraft, all of their previous aircraft drawings and everything was burnt on orders of the management. And you just think, I know you can't keep it all, but cripes, you know.
But do you think? I've always thought there should be a kind of National Trust English heritage for aircraft, and singular airframes that are left surviving don't get scrapped. I know it's such an expensive thing, renovation and
you tend to find
restoring, but there should be a criminal act to like destroy the last of something that's been made. I mean, there's hundreds of Spitfires and all that sort of stuff, you know, the really common warbird stuff. But when you see things like the Beverley that's being scrapped at Fort Paul, and you think it's the last one.
It's size, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. But it's still, an effort should be made to save it.
Yeah, I agree.
And as I said, once it's gone, it's gone. I got this kind of idea in the future with composite materials that are better replicate any aircraft and 3D print the shape of any aircraft we've had before. So I imagine museums in 50 years' time are going to have any aircraft you want printed out like a...
But they're not real.
But they're not real, that's right.
You know?
And again, I think... For us to get to where we got to this point, where's my soapbox? We're at this point now where I think it's a tribute to all those fantastic engineers who accelerated our technology, even though we're a kind of a tourist country now and we haven't got much industry left. And I understand that you've got to build aircraft in cooperation because it's expensive. But when you go back into the 50s, 60s, 50s, whatever, go back in time, it's unbelievable when you see what aircraft were built and how technology moved on, how clever they were.
Well, I mean, Eric Winkle Brown said of all the planes he flew, if he could pick a favourite, it was the Hornet.
Yeah, that's right.
And the Hornet was the epitome. Everyone goes on about the American planes because they managed to save them, but the Hornet and our designs. I mean, the Miles aircraft, the jet that we handed over. There's just so many. I mean,
well, Wilt's jet is hardly forgotten. Isn't it? It's so significant. But I do think they will regret this. Even people in universities, people training, they just go, why did we trash all that stuff? And I think it should be protected more. Even though the expense of... You get a lot of people, you go on the internet and you read about, they should save this aircraft. And that Herald at Gatwick was a classic. I mean, it was a bucket of crap, really. And there are some Heralds left, but they were going to restore it and move it. But you think, well, okay, there are some preserved. And people don't realise how much it costs to move it. As we know, Paul's involved with that, and Simon, who...
it's thousands and thousands. I mean, Newquay's just sadly shut, and that VC10 would be... But I mean, for me, I look back, they were rife for scrapping back in the late 40s, early 50s, the early Hunters. We got lots of Hunters, but there's no Brigands.
No.
There's no Buckinghams, there's no... we leapfrog. If you think after the war, from 1945 to 1955, the massive changes from piston engine to jet,
the jet
the best piston engine fighters you could get, and we haven't got any of them left.
No, it's awful, isn't it?
It was just scrapped, and it's a shame.
Well, I'll come on to another question I've got about that. So, let's change the subject a bit. Museum or location, what's your favourite museum? What's a place you go to and think, this is really cool? Because there's a lot of good museums doing good work. Is there anywhere that you really recommend or you love going to and think have got right? Or
I haven't been there for quite a while, but of course I did love Duxford just because there's so much there, you know. But I love little aviation archaeology museums. I mean, Twinwood Airfield Museum is absolutely amazing. They're all volunteers. There's all crash ecology. Flixton, Norfolk, we were on holiday, went there. There's a nice one with all the B-17
you have to write some
stuff.
of these down because I'm your nerd of that one.
That was brilliant. And Callum Hyde, a nice chap I'm friends with, he's fervently trying to do it all on his own. He's now chairman and everything of the Wartime Aircraft Recovery Group museum up in Sleep Aerodrome up in Shropshire. And he's doing pretty much with a few volunteers doing their best just to keep their memory alive and out their own pocket and make these little displays. But each little piece has a story, you know.
There are some good little gems buried. I mean, two of my favourites was the old Bournemouth Aircraft Museum. I used to love that because that was very hands-on and models and bits and bobs. It's still nice, the one they've got there now, but the original one. But one of the favourites that impressed me was the Solent one, down with the Sandringham and all that stuff. Very small, with people around talking about all the aircraft.
I've never visited it. I've always
thoroughly recommend it. Very small, but lots of people involved in the industry of volunteers there.
Well, I take my hat off to all of them because I enjoy all of them. I mean, the Fleet Air Arm Museum. Yes, I visited it lots of times, but
I haven't been there for years.
I love it when you go in because you can horses for courses. The Helicopter Museum, I can go in there and dribble over the I love whirlwinds and early 50s.
Well, again, the Helicopter Museum, it's phenomenal what they've got down there, isn't it?
I mean, they've come leaps and bounds from what they've had. So it really...
Yeah, power to their cause, really. You know, they survived.
But
again, the Nuki one was just... we won't go into politics.
But recology museums are dying. And there was lots of big ones. Tangmere Aviation Museum, Duxford. They had a Duxford... You'd walk around and see the main museum, but they had a Nissan hut like this, or a couple of them, full of recology. And then the old boys who started it in the 70s, they all passed away. The group fell apart, and all this stuff, as with a lot of these groups, and has happened to our group, the Southwest group, it just disappears. It gets scrapped, it ends up in people's collections, or someone passes away, a wife or a family member, this is all rubbish. It gets, and it's lost, it's gone forever. So I'm doing my best to keep it together.
Good for you. Okay, so I'm getting my bank transfer out again now, Chris. All right, so get your phone ready. I'm going to transfer over an unlimited amount.
Yeah.
Any aircraft in the history that you've come across that you think, I'd love to build a replica or restore something, let's just say flying condition, what would be your favoured one to actually... It doesn't matter what size it is, it can be as ridiculous as you want. What would you really think, that'd be cool seeing that flying?
I've thought about it a lot.
Dreamt.
And especially because of Western Zoyland, this air base was. And I think it'll look really cool for a Handley Page Hayford. Because they were one of the first ones here. And they're a huge biplane.
Yeah, big, aren't they?
Bomber from the 30s. We don't see 30s and 20s aircraft. And some of them were just... Some of the bigger ones were just amazing. The short Singapore as well. I mean, that's a really impressive aircraft, and there's not anything left of them. And I'd love to see something like that.
Do you think it's funny when you go on the internet and you never stop learning about aircraft types and think, crikey, and then it's a phenomenal amount of aircraft that were manufactured in this country, especially, and they if it weren't for the internet, they'd be totally forgotten.
Yeah, totally just old men in libraries, you know.
Yeah, it would be, but they really would be, wouldn't they? Because there's such an amazing amount of...
Normally specific causes as well, weren't they? I mean, they didn't have back then this multi-role
thing, the singular thing,
that sort of stuff.
And if they built one, they built, like the V-bombers, they built three of them rather than
because three companies are all competing for the same contract.
Just build them. So on a similar sort of thing... who do you think contributed the most to aviation with your historic knowledge? Who do you think, who's one of the guys, the Mitchells?
What do you mean, engineering?
Anything wise, who do you think impresses you or should be spoken about?
Sidney Cam.
Yeah. That's a connection with me. Sidney Cam lived 7 doors away from my mum and dad in Windsor, round the corner. And he had a workshop over the road where he built stuff. And he went to the same school as my dad, so that's got a connection with me.
And I've forgotten the guy's name because I've gone blank. But did you realise one of the first powered flights very nearly was in Somerset, in Chard? About 3 years before the Wright brothers. But the day he went to do the thing with the aircraft, the engine packed up and they wouldn't work. But they rebuilt a model.
Was there Cayley as well? Was there Cayley? Or Rogan?
Sure.
There's another guy. There's a lot of discussion about first flights, and then there's a few that probably were close to it. But so I can think of a couple in this country, yeah.
But he in this area, and they've done a replica in the 2000s, and they flew it exactly the same.
And it flew okay?
It flew much further than the Wright brothers, and for longer. Not much, but it did.
So Somerset would be on the map
And
even
Somerset,
more.
but we are, and I only realised this the other day, and I thought, crikey, this is a hub for aviation, and yet we've got no, apart from the Fleet Air Arm Museum and the Helicopter Museum, but nothing about fixed wing aircraft in Somerset and where it all came about.
Well, I mean, there's the thing with Western Airport. I mean, that was one of the busiest in the 30s. I mean, I made a film with my son over it. I don't know if you've ever seen that, for a school project, and that was really busy. And so it's quite influential, especially with the manufacturing companies around this area.
Yeah.
Western Filton and
Well, you think of the Bristol Beaufighter they built there. They were shipped all over the world.
That's right. Bristol Freighter.
And I've found bits there on the fire dump.
All right.
Funny one was a canopy buried. And I took the tag off of it, and it was H41. And right on that site for years, until I didn't see it, but in the 80s, was a Hawker Hunter, a Mark 1, WT616. And it obviously got broken up, and it was in the spot where it was, and it was the canopy had been bashed off, and I got sat with that. But
yeah, right. That's good.
Western had lots of stuff, and I've heard rumours of stuff being buried from the... What was the other place? Not Western, but it's nearby, the main factory. It was very close
Bristol
to
Aerojet in Banwell.
Banwell.
Yeah.
Well, on the hill on the side, Paul Charles, he met a scrap man who was saying that we buried tons of stuff on top of the hill.
We're doing really well, and I think we'll probably conclude my last question, is that these fantasy or true burial sites for loads of aircraft, which seem to be almost every airfield had a dump somewhere. There's the one at Dunk as well they're going about, isn't there, I think?
Yeah.
There's no doubt under our feet somewhere in this country some real gems that have been forgotten about or we discovered.
There's a lot of hearsay. I mean, every airfield had Harley Davidsons in boxes, which didn't happen. Yes, a lot of it would be American. A lot of British bases, you wouldn't just find aeroplanes. You'll find pieces of Lee Enfield, detritus of the camp because they had a camp dump. I mean, railways were the same. They would burn things when it became useless. They'd just burn things or bury things. I was told by a farmer that Western Zoyland, when it was empty, a lot of the fence posts around here were propeller blades. No use for them, so they reused them. Made sense. So they put barbed wire on which I think is criminal now, but
the archive of photographs as well. I mean, I found that with running the Middlezoy website and Facebook and all that stuff, and the stuff I found. And there's a lot of stuff in drawers, in cupboards, relating to a lot of this aviation stuff, which luckily people are putting on the internet. I mean, that's probably my passion, is try and record it and get up there so you can at least view it rather than just keep it in a book under the bed or whatever. But there'll be some more stuff come out, hopefully.
I mean, I dreamed to find Western Zoyland. Where was the dump here? There was, a camp dump, but you might find other bits and pieces. Usually around the back where they did work, they would say during the war has got damaged, they'd throw it, and of course they'd more near the end of the war. After the war, prices of metal went right down, so they didn't save it. They just buried it, or I'd like to add though, if anyone has got anything local, Somerset, I'm collating it, but I'm trying to save it for a museum in Somerset, and they don't want it. Please
get in touch.
Keith myself,
of course.
Or any stories or.
So, as this is an audio podcast, what aviation sound do you like the most then? There's a spanner.
There's a spanner.
Smell? Go on, give me a smell as well. Smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision.
That's a tricky one. But what sound do you think? What's the best sound to come out of it?
The best sound I've probably heard, and it was at Kemble Air Day with the biggest collection of hunters flying, and they all hit the blue note.
Oh, right.
And that was amazing, but also scary, really. But I love the sound of the Stuka siren.
Yeah,
that's iconic, and the growl of a Merlin. You know?
There you go. And smells, then I suppose there's distinct smells with oily rags and sick when you go on an aircraft, isn't there? So that's what I remember.
Yeah.
That's what I remember of the Beverley at Hendon before they criminally scrapped that, which they should be hung for.
I remember sitting in an Argosy at Coventry Museum. It was an ex-freighter one. And I sat in the cockpit of that, and the smell of the leather and the oil, and I didn't want to get out. It was if you could put it in a candle.
It's a unique.
If you could put it in a candle, I'd have bought one.
Well, there you go. There's a business proposition. Anyway, I think we conclude it there. Chris might make an appearance in the future because we've got a few ideas to do more podcasts and a bit of filming. So for the moment, thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
And goodbye, everybody. Please subscribe or like anything we do because we like some feedback. But catch up with you soon. Bye.